Okay, so I'm just going to give you a very quick rundown on joinery drawings, and to see some examples, just make sure you've had a look at the ones in the resources folder on the P drive. Go to joinery drawings there, you'll see I've just put a few examples, starting with this one, which is excellent. That's, I think, the best, but I thought I'd give you some others because this one is not really a kitchen unit, but the formatting there is really good. And also, if you want to know how to do things like lighting details, there's some really good examples there as well. And I don't know about this this bulkhead reveal. That's the only thing that's a bit iffy, because having plasterboard out there without any support is probably not the best. But otherwise, these are pretty good details. So then, here's an example which is showing joinery drawings for a kitchen, which is probably as close to the format that you might be aiming for as I've got here. So you can see there we've got the elevations showing each main surface, but also that part of it is being shown in section as well. So some of these things. But, oh, is that all? No, sorry, that's all elevation. So, no, so take back what I said. That's not the best format. It's okay to show you elevations, but you do want to section some of it if possible. And this is the one, so I was thinking of, where you can see there, some of it is in elevation, but then some of it is in section. So that's a good format. Then you don't need to have separate sections and elevations. You can do them combined. And that's a pretty standard way of doing kitchens. Oh, you'd still probably call it an elevation. Yeah. You don't need to do these extra details. That's going too far, even though we are doing them in the other class. I've given you a lot of other work that they're not doing, so it's fine if you leave those. So, yeah, so again, that's a good example, showing elevation here combined with a section. And, oh, this one I thought was just interesting because it's got the 3D. So if you're doing things in Revit, that might give you an idea of the possibilities you have when you're detailing that way, because you can do beautiful joinery drawings using Revit on its own. And it's a little bit more work in terms of the initial setup and the modelling and the drafting, but you get a lot more out of it, and then making changes is probably quicker and easier than it is in AutoCAD. But again, for now we're sticking with AutoCAD. So the first thing is just to get the referencing for the kitchen here. I haven't got very much detail obviously, but I can add that in as I do the joinery drawings. So I'm just going to put a reference in initially. I'm going to copy this one over and show you a way of doing referencing for internal elevations mixed with sections. So there's a few options. Do you know how internal elevations should be referenced? Okay, so if you want to do a series of internal elevations, I better just show you an example somewhere else. Okay, so you can have something like this. So arrows pointing in all four directions. You probably clear out that middle line and then put the numbers, because you're going to have multiple views of internal elevations, or you're going to have multiple elevations off the one reference. Usually you put the numbers around the outside, like this. Okay, so it could be in any order. And then the drawing reference goes in the middle. Okay, so that's how you normally reference internal elevations. So if you're doing one that is just an elevation, it's good to have the reference like that. But I'm going to be doing a combined section and elevation. So I can use this same symbol. I might shorten this line, just so it's not messy. Okay, so I can start by rotating that. So I'm just going to rotate the arrow lines, leaving the inside. So I've just started rotate and selected those outside lines, and now I'm going to use the centre as my base point and just rotate that 90 degrees. And so I better finish off with the line from here, just so that's a bit neater. Okay, so I'm just drawing a couple of lines so I can then trim using those to shorten this line and get rid of those. So then I can just extend this one down to show that it's cutting through, and maybe even move all of that upwards. And oh, now what have I forgotten? Of course, this side as well should be done. So yeah, look, it's fairly easy to replicate sections. So I would actually cut the section all the way through, and yeah, so I'm going to mirror this. Now, I'm trying to reference this all from a 1:50 drawing. To make it neater and easier to read, one option would be to reference it from a new plan. So if you've got a lot of joinery drawings, then it's a fairly easy thing to make a part plan, and it's a good thing to practice if you haven't done it anyway. So you can make a part plan that just shows the kitchen, and then reference the joinery elevations and sections from that plan. Okay, so I might just begin the setup of that on this sheet, and this is really what I want to focus on more than just drawing the joinery. Drawing the joinery is fairly straightforward. So I'm going to duplicate my layout by right clicking and going to move or copy, move to end. So I've got my new layout, and I'm going to delete the viewports that I've already got there at the top, and just then modify the ones that I'm left with. Okay, so unlock that, and I'm going to zoom into my plan, so I better get rid of that leader. Okay, so I've got there the kitchen area showing in my viewport, and now I'm going to set the scale to 1:20. And so notice how the text from these references isn't visible, because it was set up for 1:50. But this is where you do have to go back to the old way of doing things for your other parts of that reference. And again, it's one of those things that sounds complicated when I explain it, but it's fairly easy, I think, when you try to do it. So I'm going to go into my layers, and you can see there I've got a layer called tref. So text and annotation basically for references. But I'm going to change that now to tref 50, because it's for those things that are at that scale, 1:50. I'm going to make another layer called tref 20. So remember before I was saying in the bad old days you had to make layers for every scale for your text and dimensions, and freeze and unfreeze them in different viewports. That's what I'm doing here essentially, so you do need to still do it for some things. And so back onto the page with my plans, I'm going to, actually, so I'll go back to the model tab just so it's even clearer. I'm going to select these objects here, and then scale, using any point there as the base point really. And if I'm going from 1:50 to 1:20, does anyone want to be brave and guess what the scale factor would be? So think about it, and you will need to do this quite often, converting from one scale to another. So think of it this way, you're going from 20 to 50, or sorry, 50 to 20, so that's 2 over 5, or 2/5. 20 over 50, which is same as again 2 over 5, which is 2/5. What's 2/5 as a decimal? 0.4. Yep. Okay, so that's your scale factor. 0.4. So that's now the right size for 1 to 20. But I'm still not getting everything showing there at that scale, the text especially. If I go to my original floor plan, then the text is still showing. So I'm going to do a few more things just to get that to show properly. So the first thing would be to select all these objects and put them onto the TREF 20 layer. But I also need to then modify the text, so I'm going to select the text there and go into Properties. And then I'm going to change the annotative scale. And it's a bit fiddly, you have to select it, click on the button next to it, go to Add, and choose the scale you want to add, which is 1 to 20 here, and then select the scale that I don't want. I don't want 1 to 50, so I'm going to delete that. And then OK. So it's disappeared in this viewport, and I expected that. That's OK. So then I'll do the same with the next one. So again, one of those things, complicated when it's explained, but once you've done it a few times, you'll find it is fairly straightforward. So I'm going to delete the scale from there. Oh, what's going on there? Delete, that's better. Sorry, that one's not deleting. Ah, here we go, I had a couple selected. So I'm going to add 1 to 20, and then delete 1 to 50. And there we go, it's disappeared, that's right. Okay, so now I can see the text in this viewport. I'm going to lock the scale there. And so to fix that height now, I'm going to select the text and make the paper text height 2.5. Okay, so I know all of those things seem a bit complicated at first, but once you've done them a few times, it'll be a lot easier. So this is where I suppose it gets interesting. You've got these references from the section that it's at 1 to 50, and I can freeze those in this viewport using this one. So if you haven't used this tool, this is really what you need to use to be able to work with layouts effectively in AutoCAD. So it's this one here, freeze or thaw in current viewport. So notice how all the references from that layer have gone, but I'm left with this one. Now back into my 1 to 50 plans, and I would freeze that 1 to 20 layer, TREF 20, in this viewport. So I'm left then just with the section that's set up for 1 to 50. Okay, so now I could go ahead and keep modifying that. So we're going to have a couple of references from this drawing, so I'm going to move the number to the outside. And then copy it across. The other side. So I don't know which is 1 and which is 2 yet. I don't even know the drawing it's referencing yet, but let's say it's 103. And then that can be in the middle, just to make it a bit neater. Okay, so that works, and then we can have that line coming down like this. That's one option. Most people are going to get confused by that actually, so I'll show you the alternative old Australian standard way, I suppose. Was actually, I'm sure most Commonwealth countries at least did it this way. So instead of having one combined reference, you could have a single section reference like that, and then simply have a mirror going the other way. So it's up to you, but if you do a 1 to 20 plan, it makes it a lot easier. I know it seems like a lot of extra work setting up that extra plan at a different scale, but it's something you need to be able to do for interior design. You'll often need to do call-outs or part plans of areas to show extra detail. It's just something you have to get used to. And so you just need to be comfortable working with scales. I know it scares everyone at first, because if you haven't done a lot of work at different scales, it can be tricky at first. But once you really understand how scale relates to mainly text size, that's the big issue, but your symbols as well, any symbol, it makes your life easier, and you understand then how programs like AutoCAD, Revit, but also hand drawing works. So I've got those two references. The lines there could even be shorter, just to make it a bit neater and more presentable. They just need to be touching something that they're cutting, and they maybe don't even need to be quite that long. It looks a bit messy the way it is there, so I could shorten those even further. Something like that. Okay, but it's really important that you have the referencing set up properly for drawings like this especially. Okay, so I've done that referencing, and now I can start projecting my drawings. So with the plan here, I've got a copy over there, which unfortunately is facing the wrong direction. So it probably wouldn't hurt. Well, I was thinking of rotating, but no, I'll just copy this across and rotate it. So I'm just going to copy everything there. Don't need to copy the whole plan, just the part I need. I'll just keep it consistent and copy it to the right. And then rotate it 180 degrees. So it's upside down, and actually, so I've got to rotate that another 90 degrees. There we go. Okay, so then we can start setting up the base of the joinery unit. So you could do just a single line. You don't need to show anything else. So that's where I think people create work for themselves, trying to show too much in section. So I'm going to draw a line for the floor, but it doesn't hurt actually to project that off a line that you might have drawn for the other sections if you have that. So I've just done that, and to make my life easier I might move the plan a bit closer to that. Okay, so then just seeing which layers I have. I've got a furniture layer, but I don't really have a joinery layer, so I'm going to make one. And just so it's clear, I'll make this joinery cut, and then I'll make another layer, joinery elevation, or projections, what I've been calling them. And that will have a lighter line weight. So 0.15 or 0.18, 0.15 is probably good. And a different colour. And that'll be the layer I'll probably draw most things on, so I'm going to make that current. And I'm just going to draw a line from the edge of this unit, projecting up, and then maybe I'll draw the wall just so that it's clear where it finishes. So I'll just draw that on the wall layer that I've got for plasterboard, even though it's brick, it doesn't matter, just as long as we've marked that. Okay, so to work out the heights of your units, do you all know standard bench height? No? What's the height for a kitchen bench? Roughly 90, exactly, 900 standard. There apparently is a movement of tall people trying to make it 950. which is ridiculous. It actually, I get a sore back when I'm working in those kitchens, and then other people I know say that because they like things to be lower because they're not as tall, have often tried to make them lower than that. But appliances and things like that are made for that standard 900 height. So.
It's got the adjustable legs on.
Oh yeah.
It has the leeway to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if they really want to. Yeah, yeah, that can be good. Yeah, yeah. But otherwise, yeah, it's good to stay with the standards, I think, if you can. So yeah, so 900 is a definite standard, and then for the depth, I've done it 600 there, but you can go to 550 if you really want to. Okay, so I've got the bench height there, so I'm going to change that to the joinery layer. Just fillet those together. Oops, I've got a radius there, so I'll fill it and make sure I set my radius to 0. And then I may as well trim that at the bottom as well. Okay, so that's the corner of my bench. What about then the cupboard doors? Where do they start? Can they start from the floor? Definitely, yeah, 10 centimetres or so for kickboard, and it's not just for kicking, it's so your toes don't get cut off by the door, yeah, which will happen. I've seen people actually do cupboard doors down to the floor and think that they're being really clever and reinventing kitchen design, and yeah, it's not pleasant when you see what it can do. So yeah, always have a kickboard or some raised amount from the floor. 100mm is standard, so that's good. You know that. And so again, onto my joinery layer. So then we've got the, well, let's go and have a look in one of these drawings. Yeah. So you've got the lip there, or the overhang, and you can do it flush. So if you want to do a flush detail, that's one way of doing it. I think that's not a bad way. If you want to do it flush can look pretty good. Otherwise, you can do an overhang. But I'm going to do my bench flush with the doors. Yeah. So that means I can just draw a line from here, that's my other bench, coming up. Right, and so that's where the door is going to. That's where the doors and the bench go to along here. So this will be on my joinery cut layer. And so I might just fillet this back, and then I'll draw a new line going across there. So the thicknesses there aren't bad either, actually, as well. So 32mm is okay for laminated board. So yep, that's here specified as MDF, but yeah, well, MDF is pretty standard. So okay, so I'm just going to offset 35. And then again, you can just refer to this one, so 10mm is fine. Hi. Good.
I'd like to see.
Okay, so I'll just finish trimming this. I won't draw all of it, but just to give you the basic idea, I'll put in a door thickness there, and so yes, it's pretty good. 18mm, that's pretty good. So let's just use that one. Okay, so you've got all the details here in the example I've given you actually, which will, I think, be more than enough. So they've only done a 50mm kickboard there. I'm changing that, but otherwise just doing what they've shown there. Okay, so just offsetting 18mm here, offsetting 2mm or something, and then joining those together, trimming again, and then again offsetting. So just think about how these pieces go together. Okay, so there we go. That's a basic carcass. Now it could have a stopper at the top, so let's draw that in. Yeah, just enough to indicate the basic structure of the interior. So here. Oh yeah. So with this, I'm going to do an elevation this way that's combined with a section, and then another one looking at this side, which I probably will combine with a section because I'll have already done it. Yeah, just where it's. Yeah, well, definitely wouldn't cut through a section this way because the shelving is going to be the same height throughout. So as long as I do one section at least through that bench or through that cupboard, that gives the shelf heights and the basic shelf construction, and that's enough. So, yeah, it just depends on what your design is, how much you need to indicate. So, so here I'm just going to offset again to finish that off. Okay, that maybe needs to be a bit longer. Stretching that out. There we go. So I haven't drawn the shelf in, but I'm sure you can work out how to do that from this. Actually, they're drawers, but there's a shelf over there, which is raised, but that's fine, and that'll do it. So just keep going like that. Don't forget overhead cupboards as well. And then by doing those joinery drawings, especially the elevations and sections, you can then go back and add more to the plan. So here I'd realise that I need a joinery layer that is using the hidden line. And so I might use hidden 2 for that. Okay, so we could then maybe offset 300 from the outside. Transfer that back. Yep. Okay, so that layer's a bit heavy, but otherwise that's looking right. So, okay, so you can see that I've added this line to indicate the overhead cupboards, I'd probably need to check that when I do the elevation for this side. And then looking at the other elevations there, what else have we got? Oh yeah, so this one's good for one thing, the chevrons. So that's the last thing. I'll just mention those. I won't show you how to draw them. I'm sure you can work it out. But do you all know what these things indicate? The diagonals. Yeah, no, that's actually true. It can mean void, but in this case, it's the opening direction. So they're doors with hinges. So they open, the handles at the pointy end.
Yes, and the round, it's called at the middle, it's the shelf.
That's right. Yeah, that shows the shelf height, but it doesn't show. It doesn't show what's happening going the other way.
No, that's
So
need to show the section of the side.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's fairly easy to do the section though. Once you've got all of that, you just project off to the side. So just make sure you put chevrons on the doors to show which way they open. And you would think they gave you door sizes here, but no, they didn't. I was going to say 450 is pretty good, but doors actually do vary in size quite a bit. But, yeah. 400, 450, but up to 600, it really depends. So I was trying to show you some different sizes here so you can see these are different, and it's not a big deal. For cabinet makers, it's easy to make doors different sizes. You just cut the board differently. It's that easy. So I think these are 400s on this unit. 400 is nice actually, but you can easily do bigger. You don't want to go up to 900 or anything like that. And if you can do it in standard measurements, so 450, 600, they're all quite standard sizes, but 400 is okay as well. So looking at this distance here, if I measure across, mine's 2210. So I'd end up with an odd sized door no matter what, but you could design in a special unit for that as well to take up the extra space. So that's where you have the potential for design, and that's why it's important to do these drawings. So offsetting 450 here, starting to work out my door sizes, and I'm left over with that bit at the end. So I could make an open unit there, or I could try a different door size, maybe 400. And then that might fit a unit that's more the size that I like. What did I do? 33. Oh, 34. Okay, so chevrons, and then again try to put some interesting units in, or do something that's going to fit in with any leftover spaces rather than just trying to have odd sized doors if you can help it. And so there it might make sense to replicate that with the upper level shelves, but the doors are going to divide up differently because they're going to stop at a different point to the lower doors anyway. So they're the things you work out as you're doing your design as well. Yeah, I'll give you some time to work at that, and we'll do the site management plan next week. I think that's the last drawing we've got to do, and you're done. The site management plan. We had a look at it last week, but and I've given you examples already in the P drive. Yours will be simpler than the examples I've given you. So if you want to make a start on it, in the site management drawings folder, I've got a few examples, and this one's probably the best because it's the simplest. Yeah.
And when is it due?
You've got several weeks, so it's yeah. I put in an early date just so that you can get feedback and change it if you need to. So it's initially I've got the due date is 7th of November, but we've got 2 weeks after that for you to revise it if there are any issues. In other words, if it's not passing, you can do a resubmit after that. That's why I put it so early. Okay, so plenty of time anyway. So you've got next week to finish off anything in class. You can, if you really want to, work on it in the class after that. And then there's still 2 weeks after the hand-in if you need it.